Welcome to this Anatomy of a Scene. We're exploring in Dream of Darkness our Flower Wars. I'm Javier. So, we have in front of us two champions fighting both for their nations and also for their gods. We have our protagonist on the right. He is Xicotencatl of Tlaxcala. And on the left, we have his rival, Cuitláhuac of Iztapalapa. Lots of cool things here. For one, the flower wars are debated. We don't know exactly if they happened, how they happened. So many things were destroyed with the arrival of the Spanish. But according to the historian Mario Fuente, apparently if they happened, they were very ritualistic. Also, according to Professor Matthew Restall, if they happened, they were really flashy. Something that led us to choose this scene, to have this event, is that throughout our narrative we'll contrast how the Spanish fought, and to really see how interesting was the fighting before the Spanish arrived, we also have this scene, where it's only the Mexica fighting the Tlaxcalteca. This scene also helps us a lot to feel personal stakes. We don't want at all to come across as what some players ask. You shouldn't be something like Mario with Aztecs. We don't want to be this very school-oriented with this history class. No, it should be, first of all, an enjoyable narrative. So in order to have these very personal stakes, we have not only Xicotencatl fighting for his entire nation, who are rooting for him and are kind of nervous because the Mexica are clearly a bigger, more prepared army than they are. But we also have Xicotencatl's brother in this scene. I wrote this character as an original character, so our players can feel the hatred, the intense hatred and envy that the Tlaxcalteca felt for the Mexica. We also have here the presence of the gods. We didn't just fight to kill each other. While naturally there were treason, there were invasions, there were toppling of governments like it happened all across the world, there was something very peculiar, and that is that we didn't believe in just killing the enemy, like in so many other places, like in Europe. Instead, something very important was to capture prisoners. Then these prisoners would be sacrificed for the gods. As Mexicolor has a very good article on their website, this sacrifice term has lots of pejorative meaning to it. And something very interesting is that on this article of Mexicolor, there's a historian who says that these sacrifices were not sacrifices in the like we understand them, Westerners, but instead they were just a continuation of war. And very interesting is that fewer people died by this way of fighting, since they did not have these armies clashing like we see here. Instead, we had champions representing the two armies, and then those champions tried to subdue the other, to capture them as prisoners. Then these prisoners would not be immediately killed, but they would live for a time as the gods. And after even years or decades that some of the prisoners would live with their hosts, with the ones who captured them, then they would ascend, or they would go to the gods. They would be killed in a ritualistic manner. But the net result is that it was just our way of war, and fewer people died. So we continue. So that we can feel the presence of these gods, we have some elements. For example, these beautiful flowers that are here, they're also petals forming vaguely the shape of the gods. Mesoamericans, we believe that it was not this distinct heaven up above like Christianity thinks, and the earth below. Instead, these two realms, let's say, were very connected. The presence of the gods, the magic were always present in nature. So that's why on the right we have the petals forming Camastli, the god of Tlaxcala. And Xicotencatl is also dressed like him. He is wearing the shield that Camastli used to wear. Supposedly, these circles represented different parts of the universe, because Camastli, according to David Bowles, was a god that was both associated with hunting but also with the Milky Way, if you can imagine that. And on the side of the Mexica, our character is dressed like what many people think are the Eagle Knights, but in fact, according to the historian Mario Fuente, these were hummingbirds, because they were dressed like the Mexica, the Aztec main god, and that is Huitzilopochtli, who was a hummingbird. And we have here petals in the air forming vaguely his presence, that he's there. So this much was somewhat fictional, but the setting is very real. We are seeing here municipio, a borough in nowadays Tlaxcala called La Españita. According to a UNESCO representative I met, apparently these fights happened there at Españita. Sadly, there is nothing there. That is a constant issue with Mexico. We know there's a lot of history. We know if we had the budget, we could dig things up and find things, but there's nothing. This mountain is real, the one that we see just here in Tlaxcala. So that is a way for us to portray the cool things that happen here in Mexico. We try to give the sense of realism when it's possible. This shield, for example, is also very much real. This shield is part of the British Museum's collection, and it was made of turquoise. So this very rich, shiny stone, we chose it because the Mexica had different shields, but this one could be used for a more ritualistic occasions. This way we're portraying that it was not regular fighting, but that these two armies were kind of showing off. And it is very cool that this shield is damaged in the British Museum. So in our game, we are making use of this shield being damaged to say that it was part of a very cool ritual, the Flower Wars. We also have to the left this action of a Mexica warrior taking as prisoner a Tlaxcalteca warrior that he has defeated. We can see that some blood was spilled. Blood was very important for us. We believe, Mesoamericans, both the Mexica and the Tlaxcalteca, that the gods had bled for us, they had given their life for us across the different generations of life. So in turn, we also gave our blood and our life for them. So that's why at the very first spill of blood and when the Mexica warrior is able to capture him, the army is here raising their banners joyous, while naturally on the right we have the Tlaxcalteca worried about one of their champions losing, and also naturally Xicotencatl furious because this is his brother. We're going to see how Xicotencatl hates the Mexica, not only for continuously defeating the Tlaxcalteca, the Mexica defeating the Tlaxcalteca, but also because how it relates personally to him. We also have the fighters using the Macuahuitl. This weapon is debated. For example, the historian Mario Fuente, he says that possibly it wasn't that used, and you will see in all codices, in the Florentine Codex, in the Lienzo de Tlaxcala, this weapon, but apparently it's very much depicted in these sources because it is the Mesoamerican sword. Also the Maya, for example, apparently used it. But apparently it wasn't that common in regular fighting. We did choose to include it here because for one, it was a ritual weapon apparently, and this is ritual fighting, so it does make sense. Apparently, for example, we can see with the god, with Kamastli, we very much preferred other kinds of weapons in regular war, like the bow and arrow, or the obsidian knife. But in this case, to portray really how close this was and the ritualistic way, it does help to have the macahuitl. Archaeologically, only 2 macahuitls in the world have been found that did belong apparently to the Mexica. One was lost to a fire in Spain because they mistook it as a samurai weapon, if you can imagine that. And the other is here in Mexico City, protected at the Museum of the Templo Mayor. So another interesting thing is that we have here the banners for the 2 armies. On the left, we have the banners of the Aztec Empire. This Aztec Empire was in reality the alliance of 3 city-states, let's call them. So these were Texcoco. Texcoco is this one. What most people associate with Aztec, the Mexica, was this one, Tenochtitlan, what is now Mexico City, my home. So we repeat more this banner, the one of Tenochtitlan, to portray that these were the guys who mostly fought and who were richer and had more people. Their army was larger. They were the ones who supplied more, both the richness, the commerce, and also the fighters. There's also Tlatelolco. Now we can see also the banner of Tlacopan here, nowadays in Mexico called Tacuba. So these are the 3 fighters. And Cuitláhuac is from Iztapalapa, that is, he is from the Mexica. On the other hand, we have the banner of Tlaxcala. Tlaxcala means the place of tortillas. So this banner represents that. It's 2 hands holding a tortilla. It's super cool. And we also have here our braziers with copal. That is something that to this day burns when there are sacred rituals happening. So overall, this is the anatomy of our scene. Naturally, we have also our gameplay elements. We are controlling Xicotencatl in this scene. We can fight versus Cuitláhuac. And we have 2 options here, 2 commands. We can do the macahuitl counter, and we can also try to use the power of the god of Tlaxcala. And the other command, therefore, is Kamastli's heavenly arrow, since he was the god of hunting. Finally, maybe I also try to portray in the faces of our combatants that, in fact, they were more or less similar. These 2 groups, the Tlaxcalteca and the Mexica, came from the same ethnic group, the real Aztecs. These Aztecs, when they eventually separated, migrated to different parts of what is nowadays Mexico, some of them established as the Tlaxcalteca, and some of them became the Mexica here in Mexico City. The Mexicas thrived economically, they became the empire, and Tlaxcalteca remained small and poorer in comparison with the Mexicas. So that's why more or less they hated each other, because paradoxically they were actually very close. They spoke the same language, Nahuatl, and in their faces, their factions, I also want to portray how more or less similar they are. They use the same weapons, but their hatred was very much real. It was very intense. For Cuitláhuac, we took as reference a statue that is here in Iztapalapa. It is naturally a fictional statue because the Spanish made sure to destroy everything. And there was also on the Universal Exposition, when the Eiffel Tower was first shown, Mexico as part of their works presented there in Paris. We have this collection of Mexica pieces, and one of the pieces was also a statue of Cuitlahuac. He was the second to last Mexica emperor, and he was apparently a big, famous warrior. So that's why I decided to include him. Very little remains of him, but I took these references in order to make use of the works that have celebrated so far our history. So I hope you enjoyed this anatomy of the scene.